Long ago, veiled from ordinary sight, there existed knowledge so potent that those who held it possessed the means to form reality. This understanding, passed down through lineages of mystics and sages, waited not forever but until humanity matured enough to receive its transformative gift. Now you stand at the brink of revelation where ancient truths rise from the fog of history. These are not theory but living laws that guided the greatest thinkers of every age. Those who came to master them were able to call into being their deepest longings and surpass the limits of common life. The cosmos functions by laws as steady as sunrise and as dependable as the seasons. Just as gravity governs the paths of stars, so too do spiritual principles direct the shaping of experience. These principles answer not to idle words or surface actions, but to the unshakable certainty that resides deep in your heart. Imagination is a formative force, not mere escapism. By holding precise inner images with absolute conviction, you plug into the same creative power that formed galaxies. This faculty sleeps within you until awakened. This path will shift how you understand what is possible. Your present conditions are not fixed. They move in response to focused intent and belief. By continuing, you join a long line of practitioners who used these rules to remake their lives. This latent power awaits your recognition. A young artist named Marcus once worked in a cramped, dusty bookshop, sketching while shelves leaned around him. His desire for recognition felt remote. Like distant stars, though his paintings came from his core, they gathered dust in his tiny flat. One evening, warm light slipping through smudged windows revealed an old envelope folded between the leaves of a battered volume. Inside was a yellowed note, its edges softened by time. Written in graceful script, it described a sacred law: belief in itself changes the world. The note said, the universe answers not to casual wishes but to the steady conviction that lives in the heart. What you accept with absolute certainty becomes your reality. Marcus held the message close, sensing its truth despite the galleries that had turned him away and the critics who had dismissed his talent. He resolved to change his inner stance. Each morning he stood at his canvas and held a calm, immovable picture of success, not as frantic hope but as quiet certainty. Days passed, and on the surface nothing seemed different, yet he kept his conviction. Then, almost without notice, small shifts began. A passer-by lingered before his street display. A nearby cafe offered its wall for an exhibit. A buyer noticed his work through the cafe window. Belief proved more than positive, thinking it behaved like a natural force, constant as the North Star. When you plant a seed in good earth, you don't fear its growth, you know it will sprout. That same unshakable certainty must be applied to your aims. The cosmos responds to the energy of firm conviction. Doubt creates friction, while pure belief opens pathways for your wishes to enter form. This is not blind faith, but alignment with a universal law. What you hold true inside becomes the blueprint the universe uses to assemble your environment. You stand at the doorway of change. Your current situation reflects beliefs you have held, not the possibilities you are preparing for. The sacred law waits for your acceptance and will answer your deep uncertainty. Begin by choosing one life area you want to change. Find a quiet moment at sunrise or sunset when the boundary between possibility and reality feels thin. Light a white candle as a sign of pure faith. On a fresh sheet, write the words, I now choose to believe it, and complete the sentence with your chosen aim. Place this note where you will see it each morning and evening. Read it not as a hope, but as an absolute fact. Hold this belief with the same surety you place in the rising sun. Allow no outside event to unsettle your conviction. This simple practice is the first step toward awakening the sacred law within your life. In a crowded square, where countless people passed daily, an elderly photographer kept a worn camera. His gaze recorded life after long years of watching through a lens. There, one autumn morning, a young woman named Sarah, who had long felt unseen, met him. He asked gently, may I capture your essence? And when she hesitated, he encouraged her to reveal who she truly was, not who she feared others perceived. When he handed her the printed photograph, she gasped. The image showed a woman of dignity and inner light she had never allowed herself to see. The old man smiled. The lens shows truth, he said, but your eyes have been clouded by learned distortions. You look through what you were taught to notice instead of what is. Day after day Sarah returned, and each picture peeled back another layer of her authentic self. The photographer taught her that the world arranges itself around your perception. Change how you see, and the world changes before you. Soon colleagues sought her view. Doors opened she had once dismissed as unreachable, and her presence carried weight, not because she had altered externally, but because she had shifted how she regarded herself. Perception acts as both instrument and cause. You are not merely viewing events, You are part of their making. Your perception sends waves into reality that attract experiences matching your inner vision as you perceive. So shall you receive. Sarah learned to look beneath old assumptions to the truth, reflected back by the world. Your experienced reality mirrors how you see yourself and your place within it. Take a twilight moment to stand before a mirror in soft light. Notice your first impressions and the limitations that rise automatically. Then light a single candle so its glow appears in the glass. Breathe 3 times and permit your viewpoint to broaden. Look past surface judgments. Write down one belief that has held you back. Then beneath it place its opposite, a fresh vision of what's possible. For 7 days, each morning and evening, speak this new perception into the mirror as if it were already true. Let it recast your experience as certainly as light dispels shadow. In a quiet research lab, Dr. Elena Martinez faced a stubborn problem in quantum study. Her calculations stalled, and her experiments kept failing. One evening her mentor left a leather-bound journal on her desk. "What is this?" she asked as her fingers traced the worn cover. He replied without fanfare, "Each night write in vivid detail what you intend to discover. See it fully in your mind." The ancients knew what modern science is only beginning to accept. Thought influences matter at its deepest level. Elena scoffed, "Visualization won't fix quantum entanglement." Yet her mentor smiled and reminded her that great discoveries began first as mental images. Einstein pictured himself riding a beam of light. Tesla mentally constructed his alternating current motor before assembling it. Focused thought precedes invention. Reluctantly, Elena adopted the nightly ritual. She pictured her breakthrough with exact feeling and clarity. At first nothing changed, but gradually new patterns emerged. Solutions presented themselves as if they had been waiting to be seen. Within weeks her work took a different turn. The long-sought breakthrough unfolded not through more equations, but through a sudden precise insight. She had imagined you have the same capacity. Your thoughts are not only electrical events in your brain, they are seeds that can sprout in the field of possibility. When you concentrate your attention on one outcome, you form a blueprint. The universe begins to follow. Scattered thinking yields scattered outcomes, while concentrated thought yields focused results. The ancients trained to sustain single-pointed attention, because thought repetition is not idle wishing. It is how consciousness sculpts reality. Repeated thought becomes formed reality. As the sun rises, find a quiet place where you won't be disturbed. Light a candle to represent the clarifying power of focused thought. Breathe 3 times. Choose one aim, one seed to plant in possibility. Write it in absolute detail. Close your eyes and see it as already present. Then for the next 21 days spend 7 minutes each morning and evening holding this image with unwavering attention. Let other ideas fall away and preserve only the pure vision of the outcome you wish to manifest. In the hours before dawn, when most of the world still rests, a young athlete named Sarah ran alone around the track. Her form was precise, but an unseen boundary held her back. Something inside resisted the leap to the next level. Her elder coach, Master Wong, had guided champions for decades, and he knew strength alone would not break this invisible wall. One morning he approached her and spoke with calm authority. "Your body is prepared," he said, "but your mind clings to old stories." He handed her a narrow scroll. Its edges softened by time. On it were concise declarations to recite each morning and evening. Speak them with conviction. Let them be the rhythm of your inner life. He explained that steady repetition shapes the landscape of the mind like a river wears stone. At first the statements felt hollow on Sarah's lips, yet she trusted the discipline and persisted. She repeated words such as "I am unshakable" and "my strength flows without limit." Eventually those phrases settled beneath the surface of thought and began to alter the way she moved. In training, the barrier that had once halted her progress softened and gave way. Through the sustained practice she learned a crucial rule: what you tell yourself forms the contours of your reality. Repetition bypasses the mind's defensive filters and embeds new truths in the subconscious. When words are spoken with feeling and consistency, they transform from mere phrases into living realities. Your language is therefore a tool of creation. Begin by creating a quiet space before the new moon. Light a candle to signify renewal. On a sheet, write 3 affirmations that resonate deeply. Place your hand over your heart and speak them aloud 3 times morning and night. Make these the first and last thoughts of your day. Feel their vibrations settle into your body and mind. For the next lunar cycle, let these words become the scaffold upon which your daily actions stand. Across a city where restaurants once thrived, Marcus worked as a cook whose spark had dimmed. His cuisine had lost its soul, and the joy that once filled his hands now seemed absent. One night, while the kitchen quieted, his old mentor Jeppy came to watch, not to criticize, but to remind him of a forgotten ingredient: love. Jeppy guided Marcus to a pot and asked him to remember why he first loved cooking, to feel that joy move through his hands and into the food. At first Marcus felt foolish, yet he obeyed and let warmth return to his motions. He began to cook with feeling, and customers reacted they lingered longer. Faces lighting up as if nourished beyond the stomach word spread, and his dishes took on a new quality. This tale teaches that emotion is the alchemical bridge between intention and manifestation, while thought sets the plan, feeling infuses it with magnetic power. When you saturate an intention with sincere emotion, you activate forces that draw its expression toward you. Thought without feeling is like a blueprint without cement. The universe responds not merely to concepts, but to the intensity of feeling behind them. Allow pleasure, gratitude, and love to accompany your visions and intentions. These feelings transform ideas into attractors. At dusk, find a comfortable place, light a candle, and breathe slowly. Bring to mind a desire you wish to manifest. Now feel it as already completed. Allow gratitude and joy to swell in your chest. Sense the details of fulfillment. Let these sensations wash through your body. Hold this state for several minutes. Practice this daily, and you will notice your inner frequency shifting to match the reality you seek. Michael Thompson's life in the shining metropolis looked successful from the outside, but inside him a hollowness had grown. Endless meetings and relentless deadlines had drained him. One sleepless morning, he obeyed a quiet inner prompt, and withdrew to a mountain monastery. There were no devices, no calendars, only long silence. The first days were torture. His mind buzzed with plans and worry, yet slowly stillness settled over him, and in that quiet, a different voice emerged, not the habitual internal commentator, but a deeper clarity he had not known in years. This silence was not mere absence of sound, but a doorway to a broader intelligence that spoke when the noise of life subsided. The masters of old taught that in stillness the fog of conditioned desire clears, and the whispers of authentic intention come forward. Michael realized many of his ambitions belonged to others, and not to his heart. Only in the temple's hush could he hear what he truly wanted. To practice this, choose a morning at sunrise and sit comfortably for 11 minutes. Allow thoughts to pass without fighting them. Simply notice the spaces between them and listen for the quiet promptings beneath. Everyday concerns. Ask what your heart truly seeks and wait patiently for an answer to arise from within. One afternoon in a busy cafe, Sarah Matthews sat stirring a latte and dwelling on yet another unfulfilling day at her accounting job. Opposite her sat Marcus, a friend she had not seen for years. His presence seemed transformed. No longer anxious, he radiated calm confidence. She asked him what had changed, and he shared a simple but powerful secret. He had spent time examining the thought patterns that had formed his walls, tracing each limiting belief back to its origin. Only then could he choose a new narrative. He discovered that many of his beliefs were inherited from parents, teachers, and society. Once seen for what they were, he could pick alternatives. This awareness is the beginning of freedom. Your beliefs are architects of your reality, and many were laid down in childhood or adopted without examination. When you recognize a thought as an assumption, rather than fact, you gain the ability to replace it with a belief that serves your highest good. Begin by writing down one limiting story and tracing its origin. Then craft a new statement written in the present tense, such as I naturally attract success. Repeat it aloud each morning for a week, and notice how your outer circumstances begin to shift. On a rugged cliff above the sea, James Chen watched a fisherman casting nets with a grace that defied the ocean's power. When James tried to exert control in his own business life, he exhausted himself against the current. The fisherman taught him to move with the tide, throwing the net to where the water carried it, rather than fighting upstream. This lesson illustrated a deeper truth about surrender. Surrender is not giving up, but aligning with the flow of life. When you cling tightly, you block possibility. When you release rigid expectations, you invite intelligence far greater than your limited plans. Practice surrender by imagining your desire as a fragile paper boat set upon a river. Place it on the water with trust, and watch it float. Allow the universe to guide its course. Release the anxiety that springs from trying to control every detail. Return to this image whenever fear arises, and reclaim trust in the unfolding. In a concert hall in Vienna, a young violinist named Sophia prepared to perform, but her playing, though technically perfect, failed to touch the audience. She met an old conductor who taught her that music is resonance, not merely technique. Close your eyes, he instructed. Sense the empty hall, feel the space and the heartbeat of those who will listen. Attune your inner frequency to theirs, and then lift it higher. Sophia practiced this each day until, in performance, her notes connected and moved people profoundly. You, too, can tune your energy to the frequency of what you seek. Joy, abundance, and love vibrate higher, while fear and scarcity sit lower. Your field attracts experiences that match its vibrational state. By cultivating an internal attunement to the feeling of fulfillment, you become a natural magnet for the very things you desire. Begin each morning by placing your hands over your heart, visualizing your desire, and feeling the emotional quality of its fulfillment. Adjust your current mood to match that frequency and steady your energy there for several minutes. Return to this state whenever you notice your vibration slipping. In a bustling city, an architect named Thomas carried ideas in his head that never quite found form on paper. His projects were competent, yet failed to inspire. That longing to craft something extraordinary lingered. One evening, worn and frustrated, he wandered into an old library. Among the stacks he found a fragile manuscript describing the ancient discipline of mental architecture. The masters wrote of building creations in the imagination, first perfecting every aspect before touching pencil to page. Intrigued, Thomas began each morning by constructing his dream building within his mind. At first, the images were hazy, a curve here, a shadow there, but with practice his inner sketches sharpened. He pictured each floor, the weight of every beam, the way sunlight would spill across glass, and how people would move through space. As he refined the mental blueprint, solutions to previously intractable design problems surfaced naturally. Structural conflicts that had once stalled him resolved within the clarity of his inner plan. Ideas for materials, circulation, and light presented themselves as if they had been waiting to be noticed. His imagination acted like a template the universe used to assemble physical details. The practice revealed that visualization is more than pleasant daydreaming. It is the act of imprinting a clear pattern into the field from which form arises. A detailed mental plan guides external events, resources, and people to align with that inner picture. When you hold an image with precision, you create a magnetic instruction set for the unfolding of reality. Your mind becomes the drafting table through which possibility takes shape, and when you blend this inner architecting with feeling, the image gains momentum. The act of seeing your design as already complete sends a powerful signal to the world. Focusing your mind in this way increases the likelihood that circumstances will arrange to match your inner blueprint. The universe seems to favor clarity and specificity. Begin each day by closing your eyes, taking 3 deep breaths, and composing a vivid image of a goal. Hold it long enough that details appear naturally, then return to it several times throughout the day, expanding and perfecting the scene each time. Let your visualization become a rehearsal for reality. In a small workshop at a market's edge, a jeweler named Ibrahim had learned that symbols speak directly to a deeper layer of the mind. He would spend his mornings meditating on ancestral patterns, and then etch those signs into his pieces: spirals for abundance, waves for flow, mountains for strength. Each motif carried an intended influence. His customers wore these ornaments unaware of the language embedded within. Yet, as days and weeks passed, stories arrived. A merchant wearing a spiral found new opportunities. A widow wearing a mountain talisman discovered renewed resilience. A struggling artist gained inspiration from a bracelet etched with waves. Ibrahim's practice showed that symbols serve as shorthand for the subconscious, bypassing the analytical mind and whispering directly to the parts of us that shape experience. Symbols act as anchors, subtle reminders that reinforce intention below the level of conscious thought. When you choose images that resonate with your aim and place them in your field, they work ceaselessly to align your attention and behavior with your purpose. The most powerful emblems are those that matter to you personally. Ancient patterns carry weight because centuries of use have concentrated meaning into them. Yet the symbols you create from your own life's milestones often produce the deepest resonance. A simple sketch that recalls a moment of triumph can become a talisman that reliably calls forth confidence. The surrounding environment shapes the mind in ways slow and profound, so choose the images you live among with intention. To create your own symbol, sit quietly and reflect on the desire you intend to manifest. Let images surface without forcing them. Notice shapes, lines, or patterns that feel significant. Draw the chosen symbol simply, and place a physical representation where you will see it often. Each time your eyes meet it, pause briefly and reconnect with the intention it carries. Far from crowded streets, in a secluded valley, a gardener named Thomas watched as a monk arranged plants in regular, harmonious patterns: circles within triangles, spirals of herbs, and hexagonal flower beds. The layout felt odd at first, and yet the yield that season exceeded every expectation. The monk explained that nature operates through geometric ratios, and when we align our designs with these sacred forms, energy flows more freely. The gardener rearranged his beds along Fibonacci spirals, and the results were immediate: healthier growth, more robust yields, and a sense that the garden itself seemed to breathe more easily. Sacred geometry functions as the architecture of life patterns repeat from snowflake to galaxy because these forms optimize flow and organization. When you structure intentions or projects within geometric frameworks, you tap into nature's built-in efficiency. Placing your aim within a circle brings wholeness and completion. Using a triangle points energy upward toward growth and elevation, while a square grounds and stabilizes your plans. This is not mysticism divorced from practice, but a recognition that nature favors certain arrangements and your creative efforts can benefit from mirroring those designs. Visualize a golden circle that contains your intention. Let it morph into a triangle, lifting the aim higher, and then settle into a square that anchors the plan in matter. Hold these shapes in your mind and feel how structure supports and amplifies your creative power. Repeat this visualization daily until the pattern feels like an intrinsic container for your desire. In a city office where deadlines piled like stacked paper, a journalist named Michael found himself blocked. He would stare at the blank screen for hours until a building cleaner happened by one evening and paused. He suggested that Michael try to still his mind before writing. Like a pool that holds clarity when left undisturbed, the cleaner said, so too the mind offers insight once agitation subsides. Michael followed the advice and began to sit in brief, receptive stillness before his work over time. Ideas rose as if received rather than forced. His sentences deepened and flowed with ease. The cleaner's years as a poet had taught her that the infinite mind speaks through silence, and that the quality of receptivity often determines the clarity of what is received. The infinite mind is the reservoir of collective intelligence that becomes accessible when you relinquish the frantic need to produce and cultivate a clear channel instead of straining to manufacture every thought. Open to what arrives in the stillness. This does not excuse passivity, but invites a disciplined practice of receptivity. When you train yourself to listen, you begin to notice insights that previously eluded you and solutions that come not from effort, but from alignment. Practice this by sitting quietly for 10 minutes before starting a project. Allow thought to settle naturally, and notice the ideas that rise without forcing them. Capture what arrives in a notebook, and honor even small inspirations as gifts from the greater field. Across ancient trade routes, a merchant named Ibrahim recognized that repeated patterns and coincidences often guided his most fruitful decisions. White doves by his window directed him to different streets, and each time he followed their quiet nudge, he stumbled upon opportunity, a rare manuscript, a meeting with a teacher, a market hungry for his wares. When he ignored the signs, he ran into barriers, closed roads, and blocked paths. Through such experiences, he learned to read the language of synchronicity. Synchronicities act like a compass, subtle confirmations that your path aligns with larger currents. When multiple unrelated cues cluster around an idea you are considering, the universe may be highlighting a particular direction. Pay attention to recurring numbers, symbols, chance meetings, and repeating themes. These are the threads the field uses to weave possibility into your life. Rather than dismissing coincidence as mere randomness, begin to log these patterns and reflect on their relevance. As your awareness grows, you will see that the world often arranges itself to support choices made from aligned intention. Begin a simple practice of noticing. Each evening, jot down meaningful coincidences from your day. Notice patterns and connections free from judgment. Simply record them, and over time, a tapestry of guidance will emerge, reinforcing your trust that you are being steered toward your highest path. Within the high-stakes world of corporate meetings and strategic plans, a young executive named Sarah observed a leader who moved through rooms differently. Elena seemed to draw others toward her not by force but by balance. She acted with authority yet listened with tenderness. Her presence inspired devotion and cooperation. Sarah asked how she managed this influence and learned that true magnetism arises from harmonizing active drive with receptive openness. The masculine energy of action gives direction, and the feminine energy of receptivity opens connection. When these aspects are balanced, the result is authentic charisma. If you lean too hard on drive, you may push away what you seek. If you float only in receptivity, you may lack structure to bring things into form. Mastery lies in dance, knowing when to assert and when to allow, when to direct and when to receive. Practice noticing moments when you rely solely on one mode and choose one instance to shift toward balance, perhaps softening your stance in a tense exchange or stepping forward when you would normally defer. Through such adjustments, you develop an inner magnetic field that draws people and opportunities naturally. On a high mountain ridge, a climber named Thomas battled not only the physical ascent but an inner avalanche of doubt. With every step his mind whispered that he would fail. Others had fallen here before, why should he be different? Yet halfway up a narrow ledge, recalling his mentor's counsel, he began to replace fearful thoughts with statements of capability. I am prepared, he breathed. I am strong. I am worthy. That inner shift steadied his movements and clarified his choices. The mountain ceased to be enemy and became companion in his quest. By choosing faith over fear, Thomas unlocked reserves of courage he had not known he possessed. Doubt functions like a veil obscuring capacity and possibility. When you consciously swap a negative inner script for affirmations of ability, you change the emotional tone that drives decisions. Faith is not blind optimism, but a deliberate alignment with the law that what you expect shapes what arrives. Write a letter to yourself dated 1 year from now and describe, with gratitude, the changes your faith made possible. Seal it and place it where you will see it often. Let it serve as a continual reminder that you chose faith over hesitation. In the final phase of learning, a craftsman named Marcus sat with raw timber before him. After years of training, his master asked him to create alone. Without seeking advice, the task shook him, but as his hands moved, he found that technique. Intuition and memory merged. The work flowed naturally, and in that moment he realized mastery had shifted from something he performed to something he was. The tools and teachings now expressed through him without deliberation, like a dancer who moves without counting steps. True skill felt effortless. Mastery occurs when knowledge becomes identity. The principles you practice must seep into your being until your actions align almost automatically with the truths you hold. This is the final step. To embody the laws you study until creating is not a forced act, but the natural expression of who you have become. Choose one teaching that resonates most deeply and integrate it into every action. For a moon cycle, let it shape your choices and movements until it becomes as natural as breathing. In a secluded garden on the edge of a busy town, an elderly gardener named Thomas discovered a way of working that changed everything he thought he knew about cultivation. Each morning, he greeted his plants as if each had its own voice and rhythm. Instead of reacting with quick fixes when pests arrived, he listened. He spent time observing the afflicted leaves and the insects that moved among them. He noticed relationships. Which plants shielded others? Which herbs beckoned helpful predators? Which patterns of sun and shade favored resilience? Through patience and careful attention, he learned to collaborate with the garden's own intelligence rather than dominate it. That season the plot recovered, and then flourished past anything Thomas had previously seen. His harvests grew not by forcing, but by aligning his actions with the living intelligence present in the soil and air. This way of creating mirrors a profound truth about manifestation. You do not act in isolation. Everything you intend touches a wider web of life. When you align your desire with the greater good and the natural rhythms around you, your results expand beyond personal gain. They ripple outward, producing benefits for many. Working from oneness transforms the very aim of creation, not into selfish accumulation, but into contribution that nourishes both you and your world. Imagine your deepest wish as a glowing seed held in your chest. Now see that light stretching outward, imagining how its growth could serve others. Perhaps your success creates jobs in your community. Perhaps your healed heart allows you to love more freely. Perhaps what you manifest becomes a resource for healing and inspiration. Consider how this broader perspective changes the choices you make and the energy you bring to your intention. When an aim harmonizes with universal well-being, the universe amplifies its support. To practice this, begin by sitting quietly and placing your attention on a single desire. Let it glow in your mind, then expand its reach, imagining clearly how its fruition benefits people beyond yourself. Write this expanded intention down, including ways in which its fulfillment will uplift others. Keep the note where you will encounter it daily, and let it reframe your actions as offerings to a larger field of life. Across the city, a frustrated writer named Marcus often felt blocked until one afternoon an elderly librarian left an old journal on his desk. Within its pages, the writings of a sage spoke of accessing a great mind that exists beyond individual thought. Marcus started to experiment with short sessions of stillness before sitting down to write. Instead of trying to cajole ideas out of himself, he learned to quiet the rushing inner voice and wait, receptive for impressions. The process felt peculiar at first, but gradually, ideas arrived as if handed through an open channel, rather than wrestled into being. This quality of receiving changed not only his output, but its depth and clarity. The great mind acts like an immense reservoir of creative intelligence, ready to share its contents when you prepare a clear, receptive vessel. The practice is not about laziness, but about disciplined surrender. You create a space inside where inspiration can move freely rather than crowding it with frantic mental activity. Each small moment of stillness strengthens the connection, and what once required strain now flows with surprising ease. You become a conduit for intelligence that is too vast to be manufactured by the personal will alone. Try this each day by setting aside 10 minutes to sit quietly before work. Allow thoughts to settle without forcing them to leave. Notice the space that appears between ideas and remain open to what arises. Record anything that surfaces and treat it as the beginning of guidance rather than demanding immediate productivity from it. This habit cultivates a clearer channel to the vast intelligence that underlies creative solutions. There is a way the world speaks to those who learn to listen, through patterns, repeated cues, strange coincidences that act as directions from an unseen design. A merchant named Ibrahim wandered market lanes and noticed clusters of meaningful coincidences that led to opportunity when he followed the nudges. An unfamiliar street, a dropped pamphlet, a chance conversation. Doors opened that had not been visible before. When he ignored them, obstacles appeared instead. Over time, he came to read these alignments as synchronicities and began to trust their guidance. Synchronicities are not random. They are confirmations that you are aligned with currents larger than personal planning. Pay attention to repeated numbers, persistent themes, unexpected meetings, and recurring images. When several of these elements converge around an intention, it suggests a path is forming. Let curiosity guide you rather than skepticism. Each noted coincidence becomes a thread you can follow to discover where greater support might be found. Keep a small journal each day and note occurrences that felt unusually meaningful. Scribble the details and your immediate response without judgment, then review these notes weekly. You may begin to see patterns that point clearly toward choices and connections you would have missed otherwise. This practice deepens trust in the intelligence that arranges your days. Even in bustling offices, authentic presence draws others toward you. A leader named Elena moved through people with a balanced energy that invited cooperation. She combined clarity of purpose with gentle receptivity, knowing when to act decisively and when to listen deeply. Her power was not dominance but harmonized strength and openness. People wanted to follow her rather than be pushed by her energy. This magnetism arises from inner balance and translates into influence that feels effortless. When you practice harmonizing your active force with receptive flow, you create an aura that naturally attracts assistance and opportunity. It is a matter of being, rather than doing constantly. The subtle art is to notice when you are overemphasizing one mode and to consciously invite the opposite response, to softening push when it's needed, and to move forward when you would otherwise wait. Through such shifts, you cultivate a field of charisma rooted in authenticity and emotional intelligence. There comes a time when doubt appears as the primary obstacle between you and the heights you want to reach. For a mountaineer named Thomas, the voice of fear spoke louder than his training, but he chose to counter those whispers with firm statements of readiness. He began to remind himself, "I am prepared. I am capable. I am worthy." His inner language changed his physiology and decision-making. The mountain's menace diminished, and his steps grew steady. Faith, in this way, is a practical tool, not an abstract ideal. When you replace doubt's narrative with actions and phrases that assert capability, you shift the internal architecture that shapes external events. Write a letter to yourself 1 year from now, thanking your present courage for the results it produced. Describe with gratitude what faith allowed you to accomplish. Place that letter somewhere you will see it often. Let it be a daily reminder that you chose trust over hesitant illusions. True mastery unfolds when knowledge moves from technique into identity. A woodworker named Marcus, after years of training, found one day that his hands had their own knowing. The motions were not calculated, but expressed without thought. In the space between intention and action, he realized the teachings had become a part of him. In that moment, the craft no longer required constant attention. It simply flowed through him, much like language that does not need grammar rules to be spoken. To arrive at this level of embodiment, choose one principle you resonated with deeply and practice living from it throughout an entire lunar cycle. Allow it to inform your choices, posture, decisions, and small habits. Make a simple gesture or symbol to anchor you to this teaching. Touch that symbol each morning and let it remind you to be that principle until it becomes the natural way you move through the world. In the end, the aim of these practices is to cultivate an attitude of partnership with a greater intelligence that shapes life. When you manifest not as an isolated actor but as a collaborator with the currents of existence, your creations tend to be more abundant, more sustaining, and more aligned with the unfolding of life itself. You become not merely a person who gets what they want, but a source of blessing for the wider circle you inhabit. In a busy market district, a small shopkeeper named Sarah found her business shrinking as competitors multiplied and costs rose. Each morning the weight of bills pressed on her chest, and her greetings grew thin. One evening an elderly customer noticed the sorrow in her face and offered a simple practice that had sustained her through hardship. Each night she wrote down 3 things she truly appreciated, no matter how small. The suggestion felt trivial, but Sarah tried it. She began listing a loyal, Regular who still came each week, the steady rhythm of her hands working clay, the roof over her head that sheltered her dreams as days turned into weeks. Something shifted inside her. The practice of appreciation altered her attention, and from that new vantage her behavior changed. She smiled more while serving and greeted people with genuine warmth. Her energy became inviting, and opportunities returned not by magic, but through a change in the field she inhabited. Gratitude operates as a transformational force. When you intentionally notice what is already present, it organizes your inner world toward abundance. The ancient truth is simple: what you appreciate appreciates. The more you focus on what nourishes you, the wider the flow of provision becomes. Gratitude recalibrates your vibrational tone, moving you from lack to plenty, and opening channels you had not expected. The practice is not mere cheerfulness, it is a disciplined redirection of attention that restructures your inner experience and, through that, your outer circumstances. Begin each evening by writing 3 concrete details from the day that deserve gratitude. The specificity matters. A customer who praised your work, rather than the vague notion of being thankful for business. Write how you felt when the praise landed, and let the feeling fill you. Then tuck the note away, knowing that consistent appreciation establishes a magnetic field that draws more to be grateful for. There is a certain stance one adopts when learning to observe rather than react. A young martial artist named Jin trained under relentless pressure. His movements were sharp, but his mind stormy. When a master asked him to sit by a pond and simply watch the water, he resisted. Then he noticed how a pebble's ripple slowly dissolved, and the reflection returned clear. The master explained that the mind mirrors this pond. When stirred, the reflection distorts. When left alone, clarity returns. Jin learned to pause between impulse and response, to name the feelings that arose and to watch them without judgment. The space, the gap between emotion and action, became his power. Becoming the watcher is a practice available to anyone. It begins with 3 breaths and a moment of noticing the first impulse that appears in response to any event. Instead of acting immediately, name the feeling and observe its texture. Then choose a response aligned with your intention. The observer creates distance, and that distance enlarges your freedom to respond rather than react. Over time, this discipline sharpens your ability to cultivate the life you intend, rather than being driven by automatic scripts. Courage often shows up dressed as a small step. The merchant Arya had a secure life trading familiar goods, yet she felt a persistent pull toward an old map in a shop one day. Despite the sensible warnings of colleagues, she chose curiosity and set out down a path that led to a hidden valley. There she found rare medicinal plants and people who taught her knowledge that shifted her vocation. Her business changed, and so did her heart. The unknown had opened doors she could not have foreseen from within. The comfort zone opportunity rarely appears, and courage is the bridge across which possibility travels. If an area of your life tugs at you with both excitement and fear, pick one concrete action that shortens the distance between you and that unknown. Schedule it within the next lunar cycle, and treat the act as a vow to yourself. Create a small ritual to honor the step, and then take it. Courage grows through repetition, and every small crossing multiplies your capacity to meet larger calls. When you begin to align your inner world with your aim, synchronicities increase. A man named Ibrahim tracked these patterns in a small notebook. He recorded recurring images, numbers, and chance meetings. Then one day a contact mentioned a need that matched his skills exactly. The arrangement that followed felt as if the world had conspired to offer a platform he had only imagined. This is how alignment often looks: not as fireworks but as a series of soft but insistent confirmations that guide you if you are paying attention. Keep a journal dedicated to noting the small, meaningful coincidences that surface each day. Do not dismiss them as luck. They are the breadcrumbs of a larger intelligence responding to your ready heart and focused intention. Over time, these notes become proof that you are being moved toward what aligns with your deepest aim. There is an economy to inner balance that transforms leadership. In a room where tasks multiply, a director named Elena moved people not through command, but by holding both clarity and a softness that invited contribution. She was neither domineering nor indecisive. She embodied a rhythm that balanced assertion with receptivity. People wanted to show up for her energy because she met them with an honest, steady presence. Practice noticing when you are either pushing forcefully or withdrawing entirely. Choose one moment each day to shift toward the opposite quality. If you tend to push, soften your tone and ask questions. If you tend to yield, choose a moment to state your boundary or offer direction. These small calibrations over time change your field and draw collaborators who resonate with your balanced force. There is a quiet alchemy in the practice of letting go. James Chen learned this by watching an old fisherman cast nets with an effortless trust in the sea. When James attempted to control all outcomes, his business splintered from the strain. The fisherman's approach taught him that surrender does not mean apathy, but an intelligent release of tight expectation. When you hold vision and let go of the how, you invite solutions that could not have appeared under your tight grip. Find a simple image to return to when attachment grows heavy. Imagine your desire as a paper boat set on a river. Place it gently on the water, and imagine the current carrying it without your forcing. Each time anxiety about outcomes arises, breathe and return to this picture. Practice releasing control while maintaining the inner picture of the end you seek. At the core of transformation is the integration of thought, feeling, and action. When you visualize a clear outcome, infuse it with genuine feeling and follow it with aligned steps. You employ a three-part engine that the field answers to. Frequently people attempt only one of these parts and wonder why results stall. The ancients taught that all three must be present and aligned to form a complete current of creation. To begin, pick one goal and compose a short scene in your mind of the completed result. Feel the emotional reality of its presence and identify one tangible action to take today that moves you forward. Then repeat the visualization and feeling at night to anchor the image while the action lays the first brick in physical reality. Mastery occurs when these practices become habitual without requiring conscious force. A woodworker named Marcus, after years of training, found that his hands moved with their own knowing. He had become the living expression of the lessons he had learned. The tools and principles no longer felt external, but part of his identity. His work flowed from a seamless unity of being and doing. Choose a single principle from these practices that resonates most with you for the coming lunar cycle. Live as if it is your default orientation. Make one small gesture each morning to remind yourself of the commitment, and take note each evening of moments where you embodied the principle. Notice how slowly but inevitably your life rearranges to reflect the inner changes you sustain. There is a deeper layer to all creation that invites us into co-creation rather than extraction. When your aims reflect not only personal reward, but also the welfare of others, the universe seems to amplify support. Your success becomes fertile ground for many, and your work touches more lives in ways you could not predict. This expanded intention brings a richness that an isolated ambition seldom attains. Sit with an intention now, and imagine it as a light that expands to touch others. Specify at least 2 ways its fulfillment benefits people beyond you. Write them down, and let this wider purpose shape your daily choices. The results will emerge in forms proportionate to the breadth of your giving. Momentum grows as you practice consistently, and allow the field to respond to your steady presence. Small rituals, clear images, felt emotion, balanced action, thoughtful surrender, and daily observation combine into a living system of creation. Adopt these habits, and you step into a rhythm where manifestations arise with increasing ease and depth. A young entrepreneur named Michael had weathered the collapse of several ventures and carried the weight of each failure like a map of cautions across his chest. One evening, clearing the dust from an old shelf, he discovered a worn volume that suggested vision is not fleeting fantasy, but a precise blueprint held in the mind. Inspired, he gathered images, words, and numbers that represented his ideal business and pinned them to a board he placed where he would see them daily. He stood before that board each morning, absorbing details until the imagined scene felt lived in. Over time his decisions shifted. He declined offers that did not match the image he had cultivated, sought mentors who reflected parts of his vision, and began acting from a future that already felt real. Opportunities arrived that fit the pattern he had held. A landlord offered a space that matched his ideal. A former colleague introduced an investor aligned with his aims. What began as a collage had become a living blueprint that shaped his choices and attracted corresponding realities. Vision functions as more than desire. It programs attention. When you maintain a clear, specific picture of the future you intend to occupy, you signal your subconscious to notice matching resources, people, and openings. The practice helps you align everyday choices with long-term aims and prevents the drift that drains momentum. Build your own vision board in 3 parts: who you are becoming, the actions you will take, and the material results you will enjoy. Populate each section with sensory detail, spaces, sounds, numbers, dates, and read it aloud as though the achievements are already present. Let this blueprint guide small, consistent choices, and then watch as the environment begins to conform to the pattern you have set. Ritual can sanctify intention. An artist named Sarah found that performing a gentle sequence before creating, lighting candles, arranging brushes in a circle, pausing in silence, changed the quality of her work. The gestures themselves were simple, Their power lay in the focus and reverence they cultivated. Ritual acts as a bridge, converting ordinary moments into channels for deeper influence. The precise actions matter less than the clarity of meaning behind them. When you perform a repeated sequence with focused attention, you create a neural and energetic scaffold that supports the flow of inspiration and aligns your ordinary activities with a larger field of guidance. Choose 3 symbolic actions that reflect your intention and practice them daily. Over time, the ritual will become a trigger that moves you from distraction into presence, allowing higher-level insight to guide your craft. A writer named Marcus, stymied by creative paralysis, found sustenance in brief periods of receptive stillness. A librarian introduced him to the notion of the great mind, a vast ocean of wisdom that becomes available when individual noise subsides. Marcus experimented with short sessions of silence before writing, not forcing ideas but listening patiently. The practice transformed his work from strained production into receptive composition. Sentences arrived with a depth that surprised him, as though they were conveyed through him rather than constructed by him. The great mind operates on a principle of reception rather than manufacture. When you cultivate a quiet channel, inspiration flows more effortlessly and with a quality that often surpasses what you could have produced through force alone. To connect with this source, set aside a brief daily window of stillness. Sit comfortably, breathe deeply, and allow thoughts to settle. Rather than trying to push ideas into being, become a clear vessel. When insights arise, jot them down immediately and treat them as seeds worth nurturing. Over time, this practice strengthens your capacity to receive clarity, solutions, and creative impulses that emerge from a collective intelligence beyond the small personal will. Gratitude proves to be a practical force, not merely a pleasant habit. A merchant named Sarah was struggling in a crowded market until an elder suggested a nightly exercise, naming 3 genuine blessings, however small. She began to notice the faithful customer who returned each week, the reliable quality of her hands, the shelter that kept her dream alive. The act of appreciation shifted her inner stance and thereby the energy she carried into her days. Her service felt warmer, her presence more inviting, and opportunities began to return. Gratitude functions as an alchemical lever that changes perception and thereby frequency. What you focus on expands. When you intentionally attune to abundance already present, you stimulate the field to supply more of that quality. Begin a nightly gratitude practice focused on specifics, not the abstract idea of being grateful, but the precise details that made you feel moved that day. Describe the moment, the sensation, and why it mattered. Allow the feeling to wash through you. This daily habit rewires attention toward growth and opens pathways for further provision. Learning to observe rather than react is a discipline that deepens mastery. A martial artist named Jin learned this by the pond, watching ripples subside until the surface returned to perfect reflection. His master taught him to name feelings as they arose and to watch them without being pulled into impulsive response. This practice creates a gap between stimulus and action, and in that gap appears choice. By cultivating the role of the observer, you no longer move automatically from emotion to behavior. You choose congruent responses. This skill is essential for creators because it allows you to steer energy deliberately rather than being tossed by every passing mood. Start with a daily practice of 3 breaths before responding to any emotionally charged situation. Name the feeling, watch it, and allow a conscious choice to follow. Over time, this simple pause will expand your capacity for wise action and deepen your power as a creator. Courage often looks like a small step forward rather than a grand leap. A merchant named Arya felt the pull of an unfamiliar map and chose curiosity over the comfort of routine. Her journey led to a hidden valley of rare plants and to a transformation in vocation and life purpose. The unknown contains seeds that cannot be discovered from within closed circles of habit. When you follow a sincere nudge, even a tentative one, the field reconfigures around your willingness to explore. Choose one small daring action that shortens the distance to an unknown you feel called toward and schedule it within the next month. Honor the step with a brief ritual and then take it. Each courageous act builds capacity for the next, and the accumulation of small crossings becomes the engine of larger transformation. As your inner orientation strengthens, synchronicities become more frequent. A man named Ibrahim kept a little notebook of meaningful coincidences and over time recognized how they formed an invisible map guiding him to opportunities. These events are not random distractions but signals that the field is aligning with your intention. Pay attention to recurrence, repeated numbers, conversations, images or events that echo the same theme. When several such signals cluster, they often indicate a clear direction. Begin logging these occurrences without judgment. Over time, patterns will appear that provide practical, often surprising guidance. Synchronicities are the field's way of conspiring with your readiness. Learn to follow the breadcrumbs. True magnetism is the result of balanced inner energies. A business leader named Elena attracted cooperation not by force but by harmonizing decisive action with receptive empathy. When you embody both the active and receptive aspects inside you, you function like an instrument that naturally draws others in. If you habitually push, practice softening. If you tend to yield, practice stepping forward. These internal pivots, made consistently, alter your relational field and bring collaborative doors within reach. Doubt is a common barrier, yet it can be transformed. A mountaineer named Thomas confronted inner voices that screamed about past failures. He countered them by speaking new truths into being, statements of readiness, strength, and worthiness. Changing the inner narrative altered his physiology, choices, and outcomes. Faith is not blind hope but the deliberate replacement of limiting scripts with empowering statements that ready you for action. Write a letter from the future to yourself, expressing gratitude for the courage you practiced and the results that followed. Keep this letter in a place you will see often, and allow it to reinforce your commitment to trust over fear. When knowledge becomes embodied, you move beyond technique into presence. A woodworker named Marcus discovered that after years of practice his hands remembered what his mind no longer had to direct. Mastery is when the principles you have trained actualize as a default way of being. To accelerate this process, choose one core principle to live by for an entire lunar cycle. Create a small touchstone or gesture to remind you each morning, and let the practice become habitual until the teaching is woven into your natural comportment. Finally, cultivate partnership with the larger intelligence that shapes life. When you aim for creations that enrich not only yourself but others, the universe amplifies support. Visualize your desire expanding like light to benefit your community, and list concrete ways its fulfillment serves other people. This broader intentionality attracts forms of support that isolated goals rarely do. Your manifestations become seeds that grow into abundant networks. Keep tending the practices: clear vision, daily ritual, receptive silence, gratitude, the observer's pause, small acts of courage, attention to synchronicity, and the steady embodiment of principle. These form a system. As you live it, the field responds with increasing coherence, and the results that once felt distant begin to arrive in ways that match the depth and steadiness of your inner work. An artist named Sarah discovered a simple sequence that transformed how creativity entered her life. Each morning she prepared the studio not as a hurried space, but as a place of invitation. She lit 3 candles, one to call inspiration, one to ask for clarity, and one to welcome guidance. She arranged her brushes in a circle, and stood a moment with palms open to receive the day's impulse. At first the gestures felt like quaint habit, yet over weeks her paintings shifted in tone and depth. Clients spoke of a luminous quality, as though something larger was passing through her work. The ritual had not changed her technical skill, but had opened a channel through which creative intelligence flowed. Ritual works because it trains attention and marks ordinary moments as sacred. Repeated actions become triggers that move you into a receptive state. The precise elements of a ceremony are less important than the meaning you invest in them. Choose 3 intentional acts that resonate with your aim and perform them daily with full presence. Each action will bind your attention to a focused field, and over time those movements will become the doorway through which higher guidance arrives. A writer named Marcus learned to stop wrestling with words and instead to sit in stillness before composing. He discovered that when the mind empties, a subtle stream of ideas begins to surface. The practice of quiet listening connected him to what the ancients called the great mind, a vast reservoir of wisdom accessible. When personal noise subsides, he began each writing session with a short period of receptive silence, expecting nothing yet, open to whatever might arise. As he persisted, entries flowed with clarity and depth. The work felt less like labor, and more like translation from a source beyond his ordinary thought. The great mind is not an external deity, but a condition of clarity and receptivity. When you cultivate a clear inner vessel, thoughts arrive more polished, insights appear with surprising specificity, and problem-solving becomes less effortful and more intuitive. This practice is not passivity, but disciplined readiness. You prepare the space, and then allow intelligence to move through you rather than attempting to manufacture each idea by force. To practice this, set aside a short window each day to sit quietly, breathe, and notice the space between thoughts. When something emerges, write it down without editing. Whether the insight seems small or grand, keep a journal of these offerings and return to them. Often they will become a map of guidance that grows richer with regular attention. In markets and cities, subtle signs often appear that steer those who notice. A merchant named Ibrahim learned to follow small patterns: a repeated number on receipts, a phrase overheard at the right time, a stranger's glance that nudged him to change direction. These synchronicities were not random, they served as confirmations. When his intention aligned with larger currents, the world arranged circumstances to support him. When he paid attention, opportunities surfaced where previously only obstacles had seemed present. Synchronicities are the field's soft language. You don't need to decipher every symbol, but you do need to pay attention to repetition and clusters of meaning. When similar cues recur, they point toward paths worth exploring. Keep a simple log of these events and reflect weekly to see if a pattern forms. These breadcrumbs often lead to decisions that open doors otherwise invisible. Balance of inner forces creates natural magnetism. An executive named Elena moved through rooms with a presence that invited contribution rather than commanded it. She combined decisive clarity with receptive curiosity, knowing when to speak and when to listen. Her influence felt effortless because she did not push for control but embodied a centered authority. When you cultivate both the active and the receptive within you, you become a stable attractor for collaboration and opportunity. Notice one area each day where you can practice the opposite quality. If you are always driving things, try softening to listen and invite input. If you often hold back, choose one moment to assert clearly what you need. These small adjustments compound and recast your relational field, so people are drawn to support your aims rather than resist them. Doubt is an old companion but not an inevitable commander. The mountaineer Thomas faced inner voices that echoed past failures, yet he chose to reframe his inner narration from fear to readiness. He repeated simple truths: I am capable, I am prepared, I am worthy. And with each repetition, his posture and choices shifted. Doubt's power lessened. Faith became a practical tool that steadied his steps and opened possibilities. The practice of replacing limiting scripts with statements of capacity changes the emotional landscape that guides decisions. Write a letter dated 1 year from now, thanking your present self for the courage you practiced. Describe the results as if they have already happened, and tuck the letter where you will see it daily. Let that sealed future voice reinforce the choice to trust rather than hesitate. True mastery is when the teachings you practice stop being techniques and begin to shape who you are. A woodworker named Marcus reached a point where his hands moved with their own knowing. The gestures were fluid and precise without the usual mental effort. His craft had become an extension of his being. Mastery is not an endpoint, but the natural unfolding when a practice has been lived long enough to become habit in the deep sense. Each morning, take a small action that embodies the principle you want to internalize and repeat it until it becomes the default way you respond. The goal is for the teachings to live through you so that creating becomes as natural as breathing. When your intentions expand beyond personal benefit and into service, the universe amplifies its response. A gardener named Thomas discovered that when he tended his plants in ways that supported the garden community, the yields increased and disease receded. The creative act became fertilizer for many rather than nourishment for one. Manifestation aligned with the good of the whole gains additional momentum because it resonates with a larger intelligence that supports flourishing. Visualize your desired outcome as a light in your chest, then imagine that light widening to touch others. List 2 clear ways its fulfillment benefits people beyond you, and let that broader purpose shape your daily choices. This orientation turns personal success into generative work that multiplies impact and invites unseen assistance. Symbols and sacred forms work below conscious awareness. Ibrahim the jeweler embedded ancestral patterns into his work and found that wearers reported changes in fortune, resilience and creativity while unaware of the geometry's meaning. Symbols bypass the rational mind and speak directly to the subconscious, which helps shape reality in subtle ways. Choose personal symbols that hold meaning for you and place them where you will see them often. Each time you glance at one, briefly reconnect to the intention it represents. These silent affirmations accumulate influence over time. Sacred geometry provides a scaffold for alignment. Circles contain triangles, elevate, and squares ground. Each shape tunes the field in a specific way. When you imagine your intention held within these forms, you give it structure that nature recognizes. Visualize a golden circle around your aim, then let it lift into a triangle and settle into a square. Feel how each form supports different aspects of the manifestation process. Repeat this visualization daily until the pattern feels integrated. As you weave these practices together, a rhythm emerges: clear vision supported by ritual, receptive silence, gratitude, careful observation, courageous action, and alignment with greater welfare crafts a living system. The field responds to steadiness, so adopt small daily rituals that connect you to the larger intelligence and protect your attention from distraction. By honoring these practices, you cultivate a reliable channel through which possibility can move into form. Remember that real influence grows from embodied clarity rather than persuasion. When you know who you are becoming and act from that future self, your choices become aligned, and circumstances arranged to match the coherence you hold. Practice regularly. Treat each ritual as training for the nervous system, and watch how the external world begins to conform to the inner architecture you sustain. In a quiet studio, an artist named Sarah learned that creating a sacred sequence before work altered not only her output, but her relationship to the act itself. She began each morning by lighting 3 candles, each one holding an intention: inspiration, clarity, and guidance. She arranged her brushes in a circle, took a slow breath, and opened her palms to receive. At first, the gestures felt ceremonial in a small way, then they deepened into a practice that consistently aligned her attention with a higher current. Her paintings shifted in resonance, and viewers described an ineffable quality, as if something larger threaded itself through the canvas. The ritual was not a shortcut to skill, but a way of entering a state where creativity moved through her rather than being forced from her. Ritual works because it trains the nervous system to recognize a transition from ordinary time into focused presence. When you repeat a sequence with clear intent, it becomes a trigger that moves your attention, body, and brain into the same pattern each time. The actions themselves carry meaning only insofar as you put meaning into them. Choose a small set of 3 actions that represent your deepest aim and perform them daily with full awareness. Over time, these acts will become the doorway through which insight and flow arrive. A writer named Marcus discovered that when he stopped wrestling with sentences and instead sat in receptive silence before writing, the words came more easily and with greater depth. An elderly librarian guided him to listen rather than to force, to become a still channel for a wider intelligence. Marcus's brief practice of waiting in quiet before composing transformed his work. Ideas emerged as if delivered through him rather than constructed by him. He began to regard creativity as translation rather than invention, and his resistance to the blank page softened. The practice of preparing an inner space is not laziness, it is disciplined readiness that yields richer results. The great mind is not an external God, but an experience of clarity and openness where information moves through you with ease. To connect with it, sit for a few minutes each day and breathe until the surface of thought quiets. Notice the space between thoughts and remain open to impressions that arise without forcing them. Keep a notebook nearby and receive whatever surfaces as a starting point. Over time, you will build a direct line to ideas and solutions that exceed the capacity of frantic mental effort. Symbols and sacred forms communicate with the subconscious in ways speech cannot. A jeweler named Ibrahim meditated on ancestral patterns before etching them into his pieces and observed that wearers reported changes in fortune, stamina, and inspiration even when they could not explain why. Symbols bypass the analytic mind and speak directly to the deeper systems that organize experience. Choose images that hold personal meaning and place them within your environment as quiet reminders of a larger aim. Each glance acts as an activation, And over time the repeated exposure rewires attention in favor of the reality you intend to create. Sacred geometry offers another way to structure intention by mirroring the patterns that appear throughout nature. A gardener who rearranged his beds according to Fibonacci spirals found higher yields and greater resilience in his plants. The circle, triangle, and square each play a different role. The circle contains and completes, the triangle elevates and channels energy upward, and the square grounds and stabilizes. When you imagine your goal nested within these forms, you create a field that supports different phases of manifestation: conception, ascent, and anchoring. Visualize a golden circle enclosing your aim. Feel it turn into a triangle that lifts the intention, and finally let it settle into a square that roots it in matter. As you cultivate these practices, you will notice an increase in meaningful coincidences. A merchant named Ibrahim kept a small journal of repeating signs and chance meetings, and over time realized these events formed a map guiding him to new opportunities. Synchronicity is the field's language for those attuned to it. When a cluster of similar cues appears, numbers, conversations, symbols, pause and reflect on their possible meaning. These are not mandatory directives but invitations from a larger intelligence that is aligning circumstances to your readiness. Balance in your inner energy creates a magnetic presence. A leader named Elena drew people to her not through force but through a steady blend of decisive action and receptive empathy. She knew when to speak and when to listen, when to push and when to yield. That equilibrium made collaboration natural and sustained. If you tend to push always toward outcomes, practice softening into curiosity. If you tend to wait and hope others will act, practice stepping forward with clarity. Small daily adjustments in posture, tone, and attention compound into an aura that draws allies and resources. Doubt often appears as the most persistent barrier, yet it can be rewritten. A climber named Thomas faced inner voices that repeated the failures of others, but he chose to counter them with phrases that affirmed his readiness and capacity. Speaking these truths shifted his physiology and steadied his choices. Faith, in this sense, is not blind optimism but a practical reorientation of the inner story you tell yourself. Replace limiting scripts with concise statements of what you are building, and act as if those statements are the ground from which decisions grow. Write a letter from 1 year ahead expressing gratitude for the courage and choices you made. Keep it where you will see it and read a line when hesitation appears. Let that future voice steady your present steps. True mastery emerges when what once required practice becomes habit in the deepest sense. A craftsman who had trained for years found his hands moved with a knowing that no longer needed conscious guidance. The movements flowed because the practice had been lived long enough to become woven into his being. To accelerate embodiment, select a single principle that resonates with you and live it for a lunar cycle. Create a small physical cue, a touchstone, a gesture, a phrase, to remind yourself each morning. Over weeks, the teaching will shift from deliberate action into a default mode of being. When your intentions include benefit for others, they gain unusual traction. A gardener who tended not only his own beds but the communal soil saw his harvests multiply and pests diminish as the wider ecology realigned in response. Creating in partnership with the greater good amplifies the field's support because such aims harmonize with the broader intelligence that sustains life. Visualize how your success could uplift others and list 2 concrete ways it will do so. Let these extensions shape your steps and watch how opportunities arrive that match both personal aspiration and communal benefit. Across digital and spoken channels, people often ask where they can find more material like this one. Some creators recommend communities and libraries, while others point to collections produced by independent publishers. If you seek further resources, consider following Momentum Audiobooks, which curates selections that resonate with transformational practice and creative growth. The path of conscious creation is not a single technique but an integrated art. Vision, ritual, receptive silence, symbolic anchors, geometric structure, gratitude, the observer's pause, courageous movement, and daily embodiment form a system. Attend to each element with humility and consistency, and you will cultivate an inner field that the outer world cannot help but respond to. As you practice, remain patient. The field answers best to steadiness. Continue to refine your rituals, keep a log of synchronicities and small wins, and return daily to the simple gestures that align your attention with what you want to become. There comes a moment in every seeker's journey when the practices that once felt like exercises become the scaffolding of a new life. Imagine a craftsman who woke before dawn for years to attend to his trade. The early mornings that once required discipline now arrive without alarm because the practice has become part of his blood. This is not magic, but the natural consequence of repetition and integration. When repetition is held with focused intention, the nervous system internalizes the pattern, and what was once external instruction slowly becomes an inner compass. You too can reach this point. Choose a single principle that resonates at the core of your being and allow it to shape your mornings, your decisions, and the small rituals that lace your day together. Begin by deciding which principle will be the axis for the coming cycle. It might be the clarity of vivid visualization, the steady practice of gratitude, the quiet posture of inner observation, or the daily act of surrender. Name it simply in a sentence you can carry in your heart. Each morning, touch a small symbol you keep for this purpose and repeat the sentence aloud. Let the symbol become an anchor that reconnects you to the quality you intend to live. Over the first weeks you will notice small shifts. Your attention lengthens, choices that once felt difficult become easier, and the world begins to present opportunities that fit the pattern you are offering. Integration deepens when practice moves beyond isolated acts and threads through your everyday responses. When faced with a challenge, ask which version of yourself you want to respond from and allow that answer to guide your action. If you have chosen receptivity as your principle, listen first and let your response be informed by careful hearing. If you have chosen clear visualization, pause to hold the end image long enough to let it orient the decision. Mastery surfaces as a flow where intention, feeling, and action align in a steady current rather than in episodic bursts. There is a delicate balance between sustained practice and rigid adherence. The aim is not to become inflexible or to apply techniques like a mechanized formula. The ancient teachers taught that true skill is adaptable, alive, and responsive. Use your chosen practice as a center rather than a rulebook. Allow the ritual to evolve. If a gesture stops feeling aligned, simplify it or change it. The point is coherence, not checklist compliance. The field of manifestation registers integrity of heart and clarity of intention far more than it measures the complexity of your ritual. At the edge of sustained practice lies another shift. Your sense of self begins to widen. A person who creates habitually from a place of generous intention finds that their identity moves from a narrow self-concern to a wider role as contributor. When your aims include the flourishing of others, something remarkable occurs. Doors open in ways that crowded self-interest seldom achieves. Opportunities that support many have a different gravitational pull. They attract resources, allies, and timing that serve the larger good. Consider what your success could do for those around you, and allow that vision to ground your actions. The universe responds to projects that are open-handed because they harmonize more closely with the deeper intelligence of interdependence. To practice this, imagine your primary goal as a light that expands outward. Visualize how what you accomplish could benefit 3 people or projects beyond yourself. Be specific. Will your work hire a helper? Will your healed heart model a new way of loving? Will your creation become a tool that others can use? Let these specific ripples guide your choices and let generosity be a metric by which you measure progress. As you align personal aim with communal good, you will notice support arriving that feels proportionate to the breadth of your intention. Another refinement that appears with maturity is greater ease in receiving. Many seekers focus tirelessly on giving energy, effort, and intention, yet they forget that receptivity is the other half of the creative equation. The capacity to receive with grace is a skill that must be trained. It starts with the simple habit of acknowledging what arrives instead of immediately discounting it or turning it into yet another problem to be solved. When a compliment comes, receive it. When an offer arrives, pause before defeating your readiness by assuming it will not last. Allowing good things in is part of co-creation. The field meets you halfway, but you must open your hand to grasp what the world lays before you. Cultivate receiving by practicing acceptance in small moments. When someone thanks you, say thank you and let the warmth of the exchange settle in your chest. When a small windfall appears, a paid invoice, a surprising message, note your gratitude and permit the relief it brings to expand your sense of capacity. The more you practice receiving, the less you will have to manufacture confidence. External confirmations become new vectors for growth rather than fleeting distractions to be dismissed. As embodiment grows, you will likely encounter skepticism from within and without. Family stories, cultural expectations, and your own old survival habits may attempt to pull you back into the narrower narratives you once held. Meet this resistance with steady compassion. Resistance is not an accusation against you, it is information. Ask what the resistance is protecting, and then decide with gentleness whether you want that protection. Often, the nervous system equates novelty with threat because change requires new wiring. Allow yourself time, use incremental steps to widen your comfort zone and reward yourself for small expansions. The field responds to consistency and calm persistence more than to bursts of desperate effort. When doubts arise, return to clear markers of progress. Keep a log of small wins. The meeting that turned into a lead, the conversation that shifted your tone, the day you acted from a new posture instead of old reflexes. These entries become proof that the practices are affecting change. Over time, the log functions like a ledger of transformation, a tangible record that rewrites the story your mind would prefer to repeat. Beyond personal logs, there is another resource: community. The path of conscious creation need not be solitary. Seek companions who practice with integrity and curiosity, those who can mirror your growth without judgment. When you surround yourself with people who are doing the work honestly, you will find support, honest feedback, and collaborative energy that multiplies what you can do alone. Choose your circle with discernment. Proximity matters. The energy of your inner circle colors your field profoundly. Invite collaboration by initiating exchanges that have mutual benefit. Offer skills you genuinely possess and request help in areas where you are less skilled. Treat collaboration as a practical extension of the principle that your success can serve others. As partnerships deepen, you will see projects scale in ways personal effort rarely achieves. As you move into larger expressions of your capacity, remember the role of patience. Growth is rarely linear. Seasons of apparent stillness often precede leaps. The field is building infrastructure beneath the surface while you maintain steady alignment above it. Keep your daily rituals, maintain clarity of vision, and allow gratitude to accompany you through quiet periods. The work is cumulative, and the hidden accumulation produces visible results when timing aligns. Treat seasons of stillness as compost for upcoming success. A final refinement is the art of celebration. Many seekers postpone celebration until a distant milestone is reached, but celebration is itself a frequency that signals abundance to the field. Celebrate small victories and make pleasure a measure of progress. When you name and savor positive outcomes, you amplify the energy that attracted them and accelerate the arrival of more to be celebrated. Let celebration be an ingredient in your rituals. Light a candle, share a meal, or write a short note of thanks when a step forward appears. These acts create positive feedback loops that sustain momentum. There is a deep dignity in living as a creator whose life is shaped by deliberate practice and generous intention. You will falter, and the habits will sometimes feel like chores, but the nobility of the path lies in returning again and again to the fundamentals. In time, you will notice that your life is no longer composed of random events, but of a coherent unfolding that reflects a set of inner priorities. That coherence will feel like home. When you are ready to bring these teachings into public expression, consider how best to share them in ways that honor both clarity and accessibility. Whether through a workshop, a series of videos, or a simple conversation with a neighbor, the simplest transmission is often the most potent. Speak plainly, embody the practice you teach, and be willing to work alongside those you guide. Teaching is itself a form of refinement. When you explain a principle to another, your own integration deepens. As this stage of your path matures, you will find that the work changes from trying to make things happen into stewarding an increasing capacity to influence outcomes harmoniously. Your role shifts. You become less a manipulator of circumstance and more an orchestrator of conditions. You begin to curate environments, form alliances, and direct energies with increasing care. The field responds to this refined stewardship with results that align with both personal fulfillment and the flourishing of others. Continue the practices. Keep your vision vivid, ritualize your presence, cultivate daily stillness, honor gratitude, observe before reacting, step courageously into the unfamiliar, notice synchronicity, balance active and receptive forces, and embody your chosen principle until it becomes who you are. Allow generosity and receiving to be equal partners. Keep a record of your progress. Build a community of fellow travelers. Celebrate along the way. These threads woven together will produce a life that is both productive and meaningful, effective and generous, powerful and aligned. You have reached the edge of this teaching and stand before the quiet task of weaving everything into a living path. The final stage is less about adding new techniques and more about refining how the parts fit together so that your inner life and outer action move in concert. The practices you have learned, clear vision, focused repetition, emotional alchemy, receptive silence, symbolic anchors, sacred geometry, ritual, gratitude, balanced energy, courageous steps, attentive observation, and generous intention, are not separate tools to juggle. They are elements of a single art, the art of being the person who naturally brings about the life you intend. The aim now is to form a daily architecture that supports expression rather than exhaustion. Begin each day with a brief ceremony that sets the tone. It need not be elaborate. A simple 3-minute sequence that touches the core elements is enough. Stand, breathe deeply, recall your central vision as if it already exists, feel the emotional texture of its fulfillment, and make a small, committed gesture that anchors the intention into your body. This gesture can be a touch to the heart, the placement of a token, or speaking a single phrase aloud. The purpose is practical. It primes your nervous system to notice opportunities that match the pattern you hold and to conserve energy by aligning small choices with long-term aims. Over time, these short morning acts become the hinge upon which the rest of your day turns. When decisions arise, use the criterion of coherence. Ask whether the choice you are about to make aligns with the person you intend to become and the life you are building. If the decision draws you away from that coherence, decline gently and redirect energy to what serves your pattern. If the action supports the vision, move with clarity and minimal hesitation. Coherence functions like a compass. It reduces wasted motion and builds momentum because each step feeds the next. Momentum, once established, generates its own kind of intelligence, the sort of forward motion that attracts people, resources, and circumstances that amplify rather than dissipate your effort. Keep a small daily ledger of alignment and results. At the end of each day, record one decision that supported your vision and one small win it produced. Also note one compassionate correction, something you could shift tomorrow to increase alignment. This practice creates a feedback loop that both honors progress and identifies subtle friction points before they become structural problems. The ledger need not be long. Its value comes from consistency and honest observation. Cultivate environments that support your practice. Relationship, work, and physical space are all fields that either nourish or drain your capacity. Choose companions who practice integrity and curiosity. When possible, structure work settings that allow for deep focus and regular rituals rather than constant reactivity. Arrange your surroundings so that symbols and cues align with your aims. A deliberate object on your desk, a small shrine, or a visual reminder of your central image will keep your attention gently tethered to the life you are building. Environmental architecture is an often overlooked skill. Subtle changes in your surroundings can multiply the efficiency of your inner efforts. Balance action and rest. The habit of relentless doing is a modern disease. and equally so is passive waiting. The difference between productive action and frantic busyness is intention. Schedule intense work periods followed by intentional rest and receptive practices. Use short windows of stillness to allow insight to appear, and use sustained focused work to convert insight into matter. This alternation mirrors natural cycles and preserves the creative energy you need for sustained results. Practice the art of receiving. Open your hand to accept support, compliments, and resources without turning them immediately into chores or liabilities. When someone offers help, feel the small pleasure of reciprocity and allow the system to rebalance. Receiving is not a weakness, it is the other pole of contribution and completes the circuit of exchange. The more gracefully you receive, the more lightly abundance can move through your life. When doubts or resistance arise, treat them as intelligence rather than enemy. Name the feeling, trace its origin if you can, and ask what it is trying to protect. Often resistance is the nervous system attempting to keep you safe by maintaining familiar patterns. Meet it with patient curiosity. A few deep breaths, a compassionate question, and a tiny corrective action will usually suffice to expand the window of tolerance. Avoid the drama of defeating fear. Instead, practice small, steady expansions that rewire what your body expects to be safe and possible. Continue to refine your capacity to read synchronicity. Over time, you will notice that patterns and coincidences carry increasingly precise guidance. When multiple cues cluster around an idea, consider pausing to reflect on whether a new door is opening. Keep the journal of meaningful coincidences and review it monthly to identify persistent threads. These notes will often reveal the invisible architecture that surrounds opportunity and clarify where a next step is wise. Deepen your generosity by expanding the aim of your projects to include clear benefit for others. When what you create can be used, shared, or multiplied by people beyond yourself, the field's response tends to become stronger and more cooperative. Generosity is not mere altruism here. It's a strategic alignment with the intelligence that supports systemic flourishing. Imagine practical ways your success can be redistributed. Mentoring someone, offering a portion of proceeds to a worthy cause, creating tools that others can use. These acts amplify the effect of your work and bind you into networks that reciprocate in ways solitary striving cannot. Refine your rituals to match your life. Ritual is not about strict formula. It is a means of signaling to your body and to the field that you have entered a particular intention. As seasons change and as your capacities develop, allow your routines to evolve. Keep what animates you and discard what becomes rote. The best rituals are those that provoke presence and return you to the axis of intention without exhaustive effort. Teach what you have learned. Teaching is a powerful method of integration because it forces clarity. When you explain a practice to another person, you discover where your own understanding is superficial and where it is robust. Offer short, practical sessions with friends or small groups focusing on one principle at a time. Listen to their questions and be willing to adapt. You will find that the act of guiding others also deepens your own embodiment of the teachings. Make celebration a regular part of your calendar. Rather than deferring joy until a distant imagined future, mark small victories and relish them. Celebration signals to the field that abundance is already present and creates a positive feedback loop that increases the probability of further gain. Share your celebrations with others to multiply the effect and to anchor your progress in communal recognition. Keep stewardship as your guiding posture. As your influence grows, be mindful of the responsibility that accompanies it. Use your increasing capacity to curate conditions that uplift rather than diminish. Direct attention, resources, and energy in ways that create multiplying effects for the people and systems you touch. Stewardship turns personal success into lasting contribution and aligns your achievements with the health of the larger web in which you live. Remember that mastery is not final. There will always be further refinements, deeper openings, and new challenges. The work is less about becoming perfect and more about becoming resilient, responsive, and generous. Continue to return to the fundamentals when you feel depleted and to lean into small practices when you seek expansion. Over time, these repeated returns will produce a life that feels coherent and luminous in its ordinary details. You are not alone in this path. Alongside your private work, invite companions who will practice alongside you with honesty and courage. Form study groups, conversation circles, or peer coaching partnerships where accountability is tender and curiosity is encouraged. When you practice in community, your capacity multiplies and your insights gain traction more quickly. Finally, hold a vision of yourself 5 years hence and write a short paragraph describing not only what you have achieved but who you have become and how your work serves others. Date the note and keep it visible. Each week, glance at that paragraph and adjust small actions to better align with that picture. This practice keeps your trajectory intentional and prevents the distraction of short-term urgencies from hollowing out long-term meaning. You have been given a map, but maps only guide. The journey belongs to you. Walk with kindness toward yourself, keep the discipline of small habitual acts, and remember to let wonder and gratitude light the way. As you do, you will find that the world ceases to be a set of random events and becomes instead a responsive partner in a co-created life. Let your work be steady, your intention clear, and your heart open. In that trinity, the deepest mysteries yield to steady practice, and the life you imagine will be drawn toward you with increasing grace.